Once upon a time, in a kingdom far away, there lived a young prince named Elian. Unlike other princes in fairy tales, Elian wasn't particularly handsome or strong. He wasn't even very brave. But what set him apart was his constant dissatisfaction with life. Despite living in a magnificent castle with servants attending to his every need, Elian always found something to complain about. The food was too cold, the castle too drafty, his royal duties too boring. One day, as Elian was wandering through the royal gardens, grumbling about the roses not being red enough, he encountered an old woman sitting on a stone bench. Her clothes were tattered, her face deeply lined with wrinkles, but her eyes sparkled with an inner light that caught the prince's attention. "Why do you frown so deeply, young prince?" the old woman asked, her voice surprisingly melodious for someone of her age. Startled that a commoner would address him so directly, Elian replied haughtily, "I frown because there is much to frown about. Nothing in this kingdom is as it should be." The old woman chuckled, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Is that so? And what, pray tell, would make everything as it should be?" Elian began listing his grievances, from the weather being too unpredictable to the court musicians playing too slowly. The old woman listened patiently, nodding occasionally until Elian finally ran out of complaints. "It seems to me," she said thoughtfully, "that you have been blessed with everything, except the ability to see your blessings." Before Elian could respond, the old woman reached into her pocket and pulled out what appeared to be an ordinary glass marble. It was clear, with swirls of blue and gold inside that seemed to move like clouds in the sky. "Take this," she said, offering the marble to Elian. "It is the eye of wisdom. Look through it, and you will see the world as it truly is." Skeptical but curious, Elian accepted the marble. As soon as it touched his palm, it grew warm. When he held it up to his eye and peered through it, he gasped. The garden around him hadn't changed, but somehow it looked different. The colors were more vibrant. The scents were more fragrant. He could see tiny dewdrops clinging to the petals of the roses, sparkling like diamonds in the sunlight. "What sorcery is this?" he demanded, lowering the marble. "Not sorcery, but clarity," the old woman replied. "The eye of wisdom shows you what has always been there, but what your discontent has blinded you to. Keep it for 3 days and 3 nights. Look through it whenever you feel the shadow of unhappiness creeping over you." Before Elian could ask more questions, a courtier called for him from the castle. When he turned back, the old woman had vanished, leaving only a single white feather on the bench where she had sat. That evening, as Elian sat at the royal dinner table, he found himself about to complain about the soup being too salty. Instead, he remembered the marble in his pocket. Discreetly, he took it out and peered through it at his bowl. Immediately, he saw not just soup, but the labor that had gone into it. Farmers tending the vegetables, cooks carefully preparing the broth, servants bringing it hot to his table. He saw the chain of effort and care that had culminated in this meal before him. Humbled, Elian put down the marble and tasted the soup again. It was salty, yes, but also rich with flavors he had never noticed before. For the first time in years, he cleaned his bowl and thanked the servants sincerely. The next morning, Elian woke to rain pattering against his window. His first thought was to curse the weather for ruining his plans to go hunting. But then he remembered the eye of wisdom. Looking through it at the rain, he saw how each droplet nourished the earth, how the plants in the garden seemed to stretch upward in gratitude, how the birds took shelter and sang despite the downpour. Instead of hunting, Elian spent the day in the castle library, a place he had rarely visited. Looking through the marble at the books, he saw not just leather and paper, but centuries of knowledge, stories, and wisdom waiting to be discovered. He selected a volume of ancient tales and lost himself in its pages, barely noticing as the hours slipped by. On the second night, there was a celebration in the kingdom for the harvest festival. Usually, Elian found such events tedious. Too much noise, too many people seeking his attention. But this time, before entering the great hall, he looked through the eye of wisdom. What he saw took his breath away. Each person glowed with a unique inner light. He saw their joys, their sorrows, their hopes, and their fears. He saw how the farmers took pride in their harvest, how the children delighted in the music, how the elders treasured these moments of community. For the first time, Elian didn't see subjects. He saw people. That night, instead of sitting aloof on his throne, Elian mingled with the crowd. He listened to an old farmer's stories, danced with children, and even helped serve food to the elderly. By the end of the evening, his cheeks hurt from smiling so much, and his heart felt fuller than it ever had. On the third day, Elian was called to sit in on his father's court, where disputes among the kingdom's citizens were settled. Normally, Elian found these sessions unbearably boring, but today he brought the eye of wisdom with him. Looking through it at each person who approached the throne, Elian saw not just their outward appearance, but their circumstances and struggles. He saw how a seemingly simple dispute over a boundary line represented years of misunderstanding between neighbors. He saw how a merchant's claim against a debtor was tinged with his own fear of poverty. When his father asked for his opinion on a particularly complex case, Elian surprised everyone with his insightful and compassionate response. The king looked at his son with newfound respect, and the citizens whispered among themselves about the change in their prince. On the third night, as Elian prepared for bed, he realized that the next day he would need to return the eye of wisdom to the old woman, if he could find her. The thought filled him with sadness. How would he maintain this new perspective without the magical marble? As he held it one last time, gazing into its swirling blue and gold depths, Elian heard a soft voice that seemed to come from within the marble itself. "The eye of wisdom shows what is already there," the voice said. "It does not create beauty or meaning. It merely removes the veil that prevents you from seeing it." Elian understood then that the magic wasn't in the marble. It was in the way of seeing that the marble had taught him, the ability to find wonder in the ordinary, to appreciate the intricate web of connections that made up his world, to recognize the humanity in every person he encountered. These were gifts he could keep, even without the marble. The next morning, Elian returned to the garden bench where he had met the old woman. She was there, as if she had been waiting for him. "I've come to return the eye of wisdom," Elian said, holding out the marble, "and to thank you. It has shown me more than I ever imagined possible." The old woman smiled, her eyes twinkling. "And what have you learned, young prince?" Elian thought carefully before answering. "I've learned that happiness isn't found in perfect circumstances, but in seeing the perfection that exists within ordinary moments. I've learned that every person, every creature, every drop of rain has a story and a purpose. I've learned that my discontent wasn't because the world was lacking, but because I was looking at it through eyes clouded by expectation and entitlement." The old woman nodded approvingly. "You have learned well. And now, what will you do with this wisdom?" "I will try to keep seeing the world this way," Elian replied. "I know it won't always be easy without the eye of wisdom, but I want to try." The old woman placed her hand over his. "The eye of wisdom was never in the marble," she said gently. "It was always within you. The marble was just a tool to help you find it. Keep it as a reminder, but know that the true magic lies in your choice to see beauty, to find gratitude, and to create joy, not just for yourself, but for others. As she spoke these words, the old woman's appearance began to shimmer and change. Her tattered clothes transformed into flowing robes of silver and gold. Her wrinkled face smoothed, revealing the features of a beautiful enchantress. The Fairy of Wisdom had been testing Elian all along. "You have passed my test, Prince Elian," she said, her voice now as clear as a mountain stream. "Few who receive the eye of wisdom truly understand its lesson. Most believe the magic is in the object, not in themselves. You have shown that you are ready to see the world with true wisdom." With that, she touched Elian's forehead lightly. A warm sensation spread through him, and for a moment, everything around him seemed to glow with an inner light, just as it had when he looked through the marble. "This gift will fade," the Fairy of Wisdom warned, "unless you nurture it daily. Practice seeing the extraordinary in the ordinary. Practice gratitude for what is, rather than longing for what isn't. Practice compassion for others, understanding that each person's journey is as complex and meaningful as your own." Elian promised that he would, and the Fairy of Wisdom vanished in a shower of golden light, leaving behind only the faint scent of wildflowers. In the years that followed, Elian became known throughout the kingdom as the Wise Prince. When he eventually became king, his reign was marked by unprecedented peace and prosperity, not because he performed grand feats of magic or conquered vast territories, but because he governed with compassion, gratitude, and the ability to see the true value in things others overlooked. He established schools where children were taught not just facts and figures, but how to appreciate beauty, how to find joy in simple pleasures, and how to see the interconnectedness of all things. He created gardens and parks where people could reconnect with nature. He instituted festivals that celebrated not just harvests and victories, but kindness, creativity, and wisdom. Most importantly, Elian never forgot his own journey from discontent to joy. Each morning, he would hold the marble the Fairy of Wisdom had given him, not to look through it, but to remind himself that the choice to see beauty and meaning was his to make anew each day. And whenever he encountered someone trapped in unhappiness or discontent, whether a noble in his court or a peasant in the fields, Elian would share with them the wisdom he had gained. That joy is not found in perfect circumstances, but in seeing the perfection that exists within each imperfect moment. That gratitude is not about having everything you want, but wanting everything you have. And that the most magical transformation of all is the one that happens within our own hearts when we choose to see the world through the eye of wisdom. As the story of Prince Elian spread beyond his kingdom, people everywhere began to look at their own lives differently. They discovered that even in the midst of challenges and hardships, there were moments of beauty to be treasured, connections to be cherished, and reasons to be grateful. They learned that wisdom isn't about knowing everything, but about recognizing what truly matters. And so, the legacy of the Eye of Wisdom lived on, not as a magical object, but as a way of seeing that transformed ordinary lives into extraordinary journeys of discovery, appreciation, and joy. For in the end, the greatest magic of all is our capacity to find wonder in the world exactly as it is, and to create happiness not from what we acquire, but from how we perceive the gifts we already possess. The true fairy tale, dear friends, is not one of enchanted castles or magical transformations, but of the human heart's remarkable ability to find light in darkness, beauty in simplicity, and joy in the journey of life itself. And that is a magic available to each and every one of us, every single day if only we choose to see.